Would you state your name and experience for the record?
My name is James Warner Wallace. I'm a retired homicide detective from Los Angeles County.
And are you the author of the book, Cold Case Christianity?
Yes, I am.
Can you share the subtitle of the book with the court, please?
A homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels.
In the 2016 movie God's Not Dead 2, Christianity is, in effect, put on trial. One of those testifying on behalf of the Bible is former atheist J. Warner Wallace.
Within a matter of months, I determined that the four Gospels, written from different perspectives, contained the eyewitness accounts about the life, ministry, death, and resurrection of Jesus.
J. Warner Wallace helped solve many cold case homicides. He did this through examining and finding key evidence in the transcripts of witnesses, even ones who had been dead long ago. His cases have been featured more than that of any other detective on NBC's Dateline. Even though he was an atheist, Wallace decided to apply his skills to investigate the claims of Christianity.
I didn't know anything about what church was like, what to expect, but I did know how to put together a case. And so I started to look at Christianity as a case.
Recently, J. Warner Wallace co-wrote a book on spreading the faith from one generation to the next. His co-author was Biola University's Dr. Sean McDowell, the son of famed Christian apologist Josh McDowell. The book is called So the Next Generation Will Know.
We should believe that the Bible's true for the same reason we should believe that anything is true. If the Bible's not true, don't believe it. If it's true, believe it.
Are we ready to give the reason to answer the questions? They may just sound a little bit different in this generation.
In his role as a cold case homicide detective, Wallace specialized in evaluating eyewitness testimony.
I learned a long time ago not to trust any eyewitness, but to test them first. And now what kind of test could we apply? Well, I know what the jury instructions are going to tell jurors in the state of California. There's 14 questions we let jurors think about when they are listening to witnesses on the stand.
That includes such critical issues as, were they there when the event happened? Can their testimony be corroborated by someone else? Did they change their story over time? And also, did they have any ulterior motives for their testimony?
Did they have some bias that would cause them to lie? There are only 3 motives behind any lie, only 3 motives behind any murder, only 3 motives behind any crime or anything you've ever done wrong. It's simple. It's financial greed, sexual lust, and the pursuit of power. Those are the only 3 reasons why anyone commits a crime. So if they're lying about this, it's going to be one of those three things that's driving it.
As Wallace then examined the Bible, the 4 Gospels in particular, using the criteria of eyewitness reliability, what did he find?
If you want to lie about Jesus, here's how you do it. You wait till everyone who knows the truth is dead. Then you can say anything you want. You can corroborate them sometimes with other non-Christian statements, other interior elements that are in the actual text you can use. I use something called forensic statement analysis with bad guys to test their statements. I did the same thing with the Gospels to see if I could find deception indicators. The uses of pronouns, do they change their use of pronouns? Optional words like adjectives and adverbs are important in forensic statement analysis. All kinds of deception. Expansion of time. Why are you expanding the time there? Why are you skipping a bunch of stuff and contracting time? Those are usually giveaways that help me to tell if this thing's true. So that's corroboration. And finally, did they possess one of those 3 motives? Were they driven by money? Were they getting rich for their story? Were they getting, girlfriends for their story? Were they getting power? A lot of skeptics will say, yeah, this power. They will be a leader in their own religious community if they make up the story. So Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, you're telling me he's trying to gain power? The guy who started off with power as a religious authority to draw papers to execute Christians, you're telling me he jumps out of that context and then gets beat for 30 years, hoping to someday return to what he already had with a smaller group that's not even in favor? Okay, yeah, these things are possible, but they're not reasonable. And so I just knew after testing it, I was stuck with the person of Jesus as reported in the Gospels. Now you can apply that same approach to the Book of Mormon, to the Quran, to any other ancient text. And you're going to find out that they don't measure the same way the Bible does. So of these ancient narratives that accept the existence of God in some fashion, only one will pass that kind of test. and it was the New Testament.
If Jesus Christ bodily rose from the dead, that would prove the veracity of his claims to be the Son of God and the Savior. What does J. Warner Wallace have to say about applying his cold case detective skills to the resurrection of Christ?
There's lots of ways of explaining the empty tomb, explaining the transformation of disciples' lives. There are claims even that they said they saw a risen Christ. I mean, they could have imagined it, they could have been lying about it. There's lots of different possibilities. They could have stolen the body. There's tons of ways to account for these different facts that we think are in history. The question is, do they work? Which is the most reasonable of the explanations? Now I will tell you, what makes the Christian explanation seem unreasonable is that it requires something supernatural, a resurrection. So, but if you took that out, everything else in terms of the facts of history makes sense given the Christian explanation. It just happened. He died on the cross, he was buried, he rose again. But the problem is it requires this thing that many people have decided beforehand is unreasonable. And that is a supernatural, extra-natural event, because people just don't rise again after they've died. But it seems to me if the thing we're investigating is simply, can something supernatural ever be the most reasonable explanation? That's what you're examining. You can't decide beforehand, no, that can never be. Well, no, that's what we're examining. You don't start an investigation with a conclusion in hand. The facts surrounding the resurrection are best and most reasonably explained by the account in the New Testament. Theories about lying and conspiring don't work. Theories about hallucinations don't work. Theories about imposters don't work. I don't care what theory you come at, and I looked at all of them, even the most recent ones in the last, say, 10 years. The idea there's an influential person who has a hallucination, that he influences everybody else. I mean, there's always a new theory. And I looked at all of them to see if they would work. They all have deal killers in them. The only deal killer in the resurrection story, based on Christianity, is that it's supernatural. Well, okay, look. I believe there was a supernatural first cause to the universe, even as an atheist. Something outside of space-time and matter caused all space-time and matter to come into existence. So I was already there. The question is, could that thing act again in history? And so I wasn't as far a step as I thought it was.
When I examined the Gospels, I was trying to determine if these were accurate, reliable accounts in spite of any differences that might be between the accounts.
And as a devout Christian, you feel you succeeded?
Mr. Kane, I think you misunderstand me. When I began this study, I was a devout atheist. I began examining the Gospels as a committed skeptic, not as a believer. I'm not a Christian because I was raised that way or because I hoped it would satisfy some need or accomplish some goal. I'm simply a Christian because it's evidentially true.
Thanks so much for watching our video. If it was helpful and useful to you, I'd really appreciate it if you would follow us, subscribe to our channel at the bottom link here in the video, and tell your friends. And please follow us on social media.